TEDxKLB 2021 interactive partner series, and we're here to talk about music. My name is Dr. Shawn Wallace, also known as Dr. Thunder, and I'm here with Professor Kevin Turner. We are here to share our experiences and insight regarding the music industry. So, Kevin, can you talk to us a little bit about what you do for a living?
Well, it's basically in two categories. I perform and I teach. And that could be a lot of different things at a given time.
Right.
So my main instrument is guitar, but I also double on bass.
And let's see. So in the history of sort of music as employment, there's been sort of two streams, as it were. One is affiliated with an institution. So that'd be people like J.S. Bach, for instance, and his sons, which were all ministers of music.
In church, right?
And then the other track is freelance, referred to as freelance. These days, you see the rise, and over the last, probably 50 years in particular, you started to see the rise of what I call hybrid. And that is those that are associated with an institution, as in professors or church musicians in particular, but also are freelance musicians. And they seem to complement each other very well. One benefit of, for instance, teaching is that you tend to have your summers off.
Right.
And I've heard you talk about, why don't you talk a little bit about, because some of the teaching experience that you've had, and how that has tied into your performing.
Right. One of the teaching experience I had was 17 years teaching public school. So school starts late, like early September, late August, and it goes till late May. And so you have the whole summer off, like 3 months.
Right.
So I could travel and perform anywhere, during that time. And even during school, I could perform on the weekends. And then you have a big Christmas break. So you have almost like a month off during Christmas. So I would always do a Christmas tour for a certain number of years. I'd do that.
And by the way, this guy's played with everybody. So, just in case you wondered. So, in my own career, let's talk about prior to me taking the job at Ohio State. And of course, we're colleagues at Ohio State. That's why I called you Professor Kevin Turner. I'm the director of jazz studies at Ohio State. Prior to me taking the job at Ohio State, I frequently tell folks I had 5 jobs. 5 jobs. So one of the jobs was as a freelance musician. So recording, composing music, traveling to trade shows, pursuing endorsement, deals with companies, playing frequently, rehearsals, arranging all of that stuff that's associated with being a freelance musician. The second job I had was I was a part-time band director at a church. That's been a frequent, a common part of my, of my dossier, of my, of my career in music. The third thing was I was a full-time orchestra director for Lansing School District. I lived up in Michigan. Fourth job was I was a part-time band director in another school district.
Which is basically a conductor as well, right?
That's right. That's right. And then the fifth job was I taught between 15 and 20 students all on a Saturday. So I had a private studio. So I had 5 jobs, and that's very common. It's very common for musicians. One thing that I tell folks frequently is that when you're a musician, when other folks are on, you're on. So in other words, the 9 to 5 folks, the normies, when they're on, you're on, and when they're off, you're on. So holidays, so stuff like Christmas, vacation, stuff like that. That's when
those are our work days.
That's right. That's when we're working. Receptions, you're on. Folks are going out to a club or whatever that has live music, and they're unwinding. That's their leisure. We're working. So all of those sort of leisure, unwind, that kind of stuff that normies do. That's when we're on, and so it's a very, very demanding kind of schedule that you have to maintain. And it takes a special spouse to understand that kind of output, and what that means, and not see it as a sort of a competition.
Exactly. For example, at the university at Ohio State, I direct one of the combos. So that doesn't mean I just show up and go, everybody take your instrument out, let's play. I have to spend hours doing arrangements because I don't know what my instrumentation is going to be. So a lot of the work is behind the scenes as well. So it's not that you just come out. So as a musician, you're called to do a lot of things in certain situations. Yep. And even with my sons, they're in film. So occasionally they'll ask me to write something for the film. Yep. And one of my sons, he raps. So he'll ask me to create a loop for guitar. It's just tons of things that we do. I think that we consider, you say it's 5 jobs, but it's really like we're creating one job.
Right. That's right. Because you have to, right. This is a great point. The reason for the 5 jobs was because, rent is still due, right, and the light bill still has to get paid, and everything else has to still happen. And so you do what's necessary to stay around music. And fortunately in my life, all of the jobs that I've ever done have been music related,
right?
In some way. So that's been a real blessing.
It's a blessing.
It's something that you mentioned about your sons. One thing that often is the case that musicians, especially those with the kind of performance experience that both you and I have, extensive, like playing with all kinds of folks, touring and everything else that we've done, is it seems that often is the case that there's sort of strained family sort of situations. And one thing that I'm always quick to point out is when I know this to be the case, you're a great dad. You've done all the things to maintain those strong relationships, and you're doing all of this stuff with your sons and all of that kind of thing. And that's the way my dad was with me. That's the way that I am with my son.
Right, you are.
Yeah.
Right. And I think my dad was like that too.
Yeah.
So I don't know anything different.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was always down on the ground playing playing with toys.
Absolutely.
And then my wife and I, when they took music lessons, how the teacher would send home a practice report with the students, and most students would just make up something on the practice report.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my wife and I, we would actually sit there and practice every day with them, which took an hour time, from our time, but we would actually sit down on the piano right next to them while they practice the same stuff you do with Moses. So,
All right. So what are some of the misconceptions you think about Columbus music scene? And do you have a sense that this community is significantly or substantially different than other scenes?
oh yeah, since I grew up, I was born and raised here, and you were born here, right?
I was born here.
Yep, and then moved, and your dad's from here.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so
Both my parents. Yep.
and so your dad, so way back when your dad used to hang out, Bobby Floyd, always
That's
talks
right.
about your dad,
That's right.
But,
My dad was a great saxophone player. He actually played in a band with Bobby.
right.
Yeah.
So Columbus is very different than other towns. Not you and I have friends that live elsewhere.
Yes.
So, like for example, during the pandemic, a mutual friend of ours, a drummer, has had a gig every day for probably the last 3 months during the pandemic, and 3 gigs on Sunday.
Reggie Jackson is who we're talking about, by the way.
and that is because Reggie is a great drummer.
He's the best, and he has the right disposition.
Right.
He actually plays like he wants to play.
Right. Right. So now I have friends that have resumes, like with Quincy Jones on it, Michael Jackson, and I talk to them and they go, man, I can't buy a gig.
Yeah. Yeah. So during the pandemic, it was very challenging for everyone. But I will say that in the Columbus community, there were still a number of gigs. I was still gigging with my quartet about once a month. I was still playing at church every weekend. And then a number of, other sort of online kind of opportunities that the pandemic sort of caused us to have to do. So I've done a number of those sort of multi-cam kind of videos where you're collaborating with other folks. You do your part and somebody assembles the things together.
You got quite a bit of that.
Yeah.
How many episodes?
And then the interview series. So, we were kind of joking about this before. I told the joke, I said, it seems like we've done this before.
Right.
That's because I have a interview series called Conversations with Dr. Thunder. And you were one of the folks that I interviewed. I also interviewed Reggie Jackson, which we were just talking about, and a number of other Columbus folks.
And national.
And a bunch of national folks.
Yeah.
So I directed Jazz Ensemble at Ohio State. And this year we've been focusing on the music of John Clayton. And if you don't know who John Clayton is, he's a very important figure in the jazz world. And he's a great composer, arranger, prolific composer and arranger, great bass player.
And the father of Gerald Clayton.
That's right. And who was a finalist in the Thelonious Monk jazz composition. So he's also a great dad. Right. So he's also a great dad. And so if you want to know who John Clayton is, during the Gulf War, at the Super Bowl, Whitney Houston sang that's right, Star Spangled Banner, most memorable thing. John Clayton was the arranger of that. Okay, so it just gives you an idea of the sort of magnitude of this guy. But he's one of the guys that I've interviewed in my Conversations with Dr. Thunder series. But this has sort of opened up different opportunities, and we've had to think creatively. One thing about Columbus, you have to. I love living here because the cost of living is low, and pretty much any kind of style of music that you want to play, there's a significant sort of underground community. One of the challenges with Columbus is that there isn't a sort of central location that sort of is spreading this information, marketing the information about a lot of these communities. So you could live in Columbus and not really be aware of all of the stuff that's going on.
Right.
And that sort of leads to this next thing. And I think one of the challenges that Columbus has is, though it is a city, a northern city, as it were, I still find Columbus to be quite segregated. Segregated with respect to the sort of populations of musicians that tend to work together. Maybe there is some racial segregation, but for the most part, stylistically. So, I grew up in Michigan, and Detroit has a profound impact over the whole state, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter where I was in Michigan, there was always this sort of expectation that, the drummer that was playing at church, he was also the guy that was playing in this big band. The heavy metal guitar player is also a great jazz player. The bass player that's playing at church is also, playing in the DSO. There was a lot of that kind of, everybody is kind of doing everything. And there's not as much of that in Columbus. I'd like to see that change.
That is a very good point. In the bigger cities, the musicians seem to be more versatile.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Here, everybody goes, "Oh, I just play this, just in this little box over here."
And what's interesting is that there's no shortage of musicians that are capable in Columbus of doing all of those other styles.
Right.
But I think that since there's not a real community, like the community's not sort of developed around that idea, I think it makes it more challenging for folks that have those sort of multi-skills,
Right.
folks like Hamilton Hardin,
Right.
to be able to do all of the stuff that he would have been capable of doing
Right.
in this scene,
Right. Yeah, and Hamilton does a lot.
So
what are some of the highlights of your career?
Oh,
would you
man.
say? I know one is you becoming a professor at Ohio State University. It's not an easy thing to do, and what a blessing that is.
Absolutely.
But there have been in other, in education and performance. And what are some of the highlights, would you say?
One highlight was when I completed my doctorate, which was in 2019. That doctorate was not necessary. I already had achieved tenure at Ohio State, but it was something I wanted to do to, partly was to establish an expectation, to establish the standard for my family.
Right.
So my son is like, oh, he's got a doctorate. Maybe I should, maybe I should get some stuff together. So that was part of it. But I honestly had an interest in what it was that I was studying. It's a saxophone performance degree.
In classical, though.
And right. Well, actually, all my degrees are basically classical degrees.
Okay.
And as I've interviewed a lot of artists, there's 171 episodes of Conversations with Dr. Thunder, by the way. A lot of the folks that are jazz musicians, for varying reasons, maybe because back when they were in school, there weren't as many jazz studies options. But a lot of them were Bachelor of Arts or performance degrees, and performance degrees are classical degrees.
Right.
But so when I finished my doctorate, I found that everything was over. I was actually on tour with the Count Basie Orchestra, and for the first time, announced from the stage, I was in Europe. Scotty Barnhart, who I also interviewed, he introduced me as Dr. Shawn Wallace, Dr. Shawn Thunder Wallace, and that was for the first time,
Right.
when I was over there. So that was a highlight. Just touring with that band has been a highlight. Something I talk to my students about frequently is having goals and frequently revising those goals. Because as you accomplish things that are on your list, at one point in time, a dream goal of mine was to become a tenured professor at a major university.
Right.
Right. So, so then once that happened, it's like you have to revise your goals. You have to come up with
more goals.
That's right.
Right.
Set different standards. And I'm a pretty faceted, multi-dimensional kind of
Right.
person. So I have a extensive list of goals for all kinds of different things. I'm a multi-instrumentalist, so I have goals for each instrument. I compose, I arrange, I do the sort of three things necessary to work in the music industry, and that's some performing, some teaching, some composing, arranging. And now composing, arranging, it also means have your own studio, be able to produce, understand,
Oh, right.
the technology,
Right.
all of that kind of stuff, be able to produce videos, all of this kind of stuff. I mean, that's what's meant by that now. But one of my goals is, I go to the gym. I'm 5 days a week gym person, and my max bench press currently is 420, and I'm chasing 500. So that's a goal, and so those are things that I'm constantly working towards. And it's the sort of day-to-day kind of stuff that you do that allows you to be able to to push for those goals. The two things I probably missed the most during the first 2 months of the pandemic, where everything got shut down. The two things were performing on stage in front of an audience, and the second thing was going to the gym.
Right.
The gym's been powerfully therapeutic and has been a powerful stress reliever.
Right. And that's connected to your music career as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think the better health that you're in, the longer you can play, the longer you'll be able to do this. What's the sense in spending all this time in the practice room to get everything together if your health is lousy? And so then therefore you can't music is one of these things where you can do that forever.
Right.
You can do it as long as you're alive, right? It's not like,
It's not like you retire at 65.
and it's not like, playing running back.
Right.
Where you got maybe like 5 good years, it's not like that. So I think it becomes very important to take care of yourself so that you can continue doing it.
So you've had highlights though, even early in your music career, because you started early.
Yeah, well, my first record came out when I was 14, and I have 8 projects out. The latest of which was my first classical project, which is all of the, well, not all. It's a Marcel Mule commissioned works collection. And really challenging music is all saxophone and piano. I appeared on CBS Sunday Morning when I was working on my undergraduate degree. I was on Phil Donahue show when I was 19. I was on BET Jazz Central. I've had dozens of articles written in major publications, my favorite stuff is always the performing opportunities. So, playing with like Victor Wooten and, like I said, the Basie Band. I frequently play with the Columbus Jazz Orchestra. That's the stuff that,
So basically, you were just gifted, and you didn't really have to work hard or anything to get the skills to be able to do this stuff. You were just going on pure talent.
That's right. I was,
You didn't add any work to it.
That's right.
Discipline.
It's one of these unfortunate things that it seems that there are these sort of stereotypes about Black folks, but in particular about Black men, that we get talked about as having natural ability, but our sort of white counterparts get talked about having a lot of discipline and tenacity and work ethic and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And it's just not how it works. A talent is a cultivated gift. A talent is a cultivated gift. So someone is not talented because they just have natural ability. You have to work with the natural ability to transform it into a talent. I started when I was 6. I was practicing several hours a day, I had an unfair advantage. My unfair advantage was my dad was a great saxophone player, and I got about 3 or 4 lessons every week and an attentive ear on the practice room. My practice room, my dad cut a hole in the wall in the living room under the stairs where there was wasted space, padded the room, and then so while he was watching TV, could hear everything I was practicing.
So he monitored.
That's right. He was like, "You don't go on to that next one. That first one wasn't right." So yeah. So lots of practicing and the right kind of instruction.
Right. So getting back to those 5, the 5 jobs, each of those requires a certain discipline.
Yeah.
So it's not only just practicing. Well, for you decided, hey, I want to play bass too.
Yeah.
Bass players work a lot, so you had to carve out some time to play bass, and then you added guitar to carve out some time to play guitar as well. And then you double, you play flute and those instruments. You have to keep all that.
Yeah, I tell all my saxophone students at Ohio State, I tell them, look, if you play saxophone, that means you play flute and clarinet also. Those are the expected instruments to play. I've played a number of musicals where if I didn't play those other instruments, I wouldn't have been able to do it.
Wouldn't be.
That's right.
Hired.
That's right. I played the Carole King musical when it came to town here. I played the Motown musical. And when I was in college, I did My Favorite Year, Evita, Oliver, and Cinderella. And all of those, I also played Once on an Island. All of those were, there's a pile of woodwind instruments that I had to be able to play well. But, play well enough so that if one of those was the only instrument I was playing, the expectation for how I would play that way. And the thing is, and sometimes people will look at like, oh man, you play so many instruments. Look, I want to work. Okay.
Right.
And so picking up other skills it's utilitarian. I'm doing what it's necessary to get the job done. And that's really the way that we have to look at this.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. I know that I hear on Facebook, I see a lot of musicians writing, making comments about different things. And it seems to me that a lot of times, and Dr. Ruffin and I discussed this too, that
interviewed him too.
Right. In order to work as a musician, there are a lot of things that happen that would facilitate you being able to do more things, and a lot of work that people may not know that we do. They see us at church, playing that particular role, but they don't see us when we get hired to do horn arrangements.
Right.
Like there was one period during the pandemic, I think, that it was about 2 months that I did a lot of horn arrangements for, and I'm a guitar player. But, it requires me knowing about ranges,
right?
Whether or not the trombone player is playing from first position all the way out like that,
Ergonomics.
Exactly. I mean, because you pass out a trombone part and they go, I can't play this.
Yeah, another reason why it seemed native for me to start learning these other instruments, I was borrowing from a great composer's technique. What they used to do frequently is they would learn a new instrument when they were going to write like a concerto, right? They would go and take lessons with someone. And even if they didn't become, great players,
right,
they learned so much about the instrument, right? And so then they could. So I worked at a big church in town here for 5.5 years, and it's a big evangelical church, guitar driven. There's always like 3 or 4 guitars on the stage all the time. And when I took that job, and this was years ago, I didn't play guitar, but I started learning guitar because I wanted to be a better writer, a better arranger for that instrument. And then I just fell in love with the instrument and started spending way too much time at Guitar Center. And I have pictures of me and my son, as if it's some momentous occasion, the first time us going to Guitar Center.
I mean, this talk could have been just about that.
right, exactly. And spent too much money and all of that. It looks like so. Yeah. So, what's been the role of spirituality in your?
Well, for me, all of my opportunities I consider a blessing.
Yeah.
People go, "Oh, Kevin, you worked for this and you earned this." No, for me, that's not how it works. I mean, because I've had positions and been in places where I just know it was a blessing. I'm wondering how did they find me? I've gotten calls from people. I like, how did they even get my number? They passed, other guitar players on the list, or either called me 10th on the list, but nevertheless, I've gotten calls, and I just consider it a blessing because I have, like I said, I have lots of friends that, that have struggled in areas where I hadn't struggled in terms of working as a musician. So I credit Christ for providing those opportunities for me.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. My Christianity is central. I believe that the Christian worldview is the most internally consistent and does the best for me is the best explanation for the way that things are. At least it allows me to make sense of things, and that's really important for me. And I believe that there's been a tremendous sort of hand of God on my life, providence, sort of, even if I don't know what the next step is going to be, the next job is going to be, even the fact that I'm at Ohio State. A buddy of mine, a good friend of mine, he sent me the job announcement after the deadline had already passed. And I knew my predecessor, Dr. Ted McDaniel, because he had hired my band to play at the Jazz Festival. And also he was following my career because I started young and was doing the IAJE conferences and things. And so I called him. I said, "Hey, man, I'm late for this. So can I still get my stuff in?" He said, "Yes, get your stuff in." Like the rest is history, So stuff like that, if my friend hadn't sent me that, because I was, I had 5 jobs. I was, I was busy. So, yeah, it's definitely been critical.
Yeah.
And I met my wife working at a church, they'll tell you often is the case that you'll meet your spouse on your journey as you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Right.
Yep. That happened for me too. That's how I met Cynthia at New Salem. They had, when they used to have the outdoor service in the summer, right behind those apartments, right across the street. I remember I saw, it was Dwight and Reggie. They were all playing in the choir, and Milton also played in the young adult choir. And Milton goes, "Hey, you want to sub on bass?" And I said, "Sure, I would love to sub on bass." And the rest is
Right. You know, it's funny because the whole reason that I was even at New Salem was uh, because Milton and Merlin created a position for me. Now, the way this worked was I had taken 3 years off from playing in church. I had just moved to Columbus. The first couple of years, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to go to church and I'm not going to worry about it. But I really missed playing. And folks told me, hey, you should connect with Milton. And he was working on his PhD at Ohio State. And so I bumped into him one evening. I said, hey, man, I really want to play and X, Y, and Z, and I'm playing bass now. So if you think that'll help and like this, he says, well, check it out. Just show up to rehearsals on Wednesdays. It's at what's your name time. And I just started showing up. I brought my instrument. I knew the music. I was there for like a month and a half. I didn't expect anything. I just was like this. And so they created a position and then retroactively paid me for the time that I had served doing rehearsals. So that was the only reason. That was the reason that I was there to meet my wife. So I really credit them both for that.
They're so giving. Yeah, they're so giving. Well, that ends our discussion.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us for the TEDxKLB 2021 Interactive Partner Series. Have a great day.